So building on Caroline's opening address, the next two speakers will talk about the various opportunities we have from each end of the supply chain. So first we're going to have Marion MacCormick. Marion worked for Aldi as a buyer for 19 years until early this year when she became Scottish Agri-Champion for Future Strategy. With a keen eye for brand value, Marion will give us a buyer's perspective. Marion, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks to the Scottish contingent here who got me down. You might regret that later on. Just to give you, that was a little bit of a bio, but I'm going to just tell you a little bit about my time in Aldi, because I think it forms a train of thought which I like to think I can pick up on again towards the end. I worked for Aldi for 18 years, 19 just as I finished there. For the first 8 years of when I first joined, there was 400 people that worked for Aldi, and for those 8 years, the focus of the business was absolutely simplicity, efficiency and productivity. And actually, probably, we overlooked one of the major factors in retail, which was consumers. But 8 years ago, that all changed, and we really focused on product and quality and keeping close to the business acumen that there was in the business anyway. And I would like to think at that juncture is when the sorry, I've got to get a grip of this. That's when the trends, I would like to think, started to change, and focusing on that in terms of, so we had business acumen and the efficiencies. I think you've all seen where Aldi has got to in terms of the kind of business it is now. It's £1 billion business, but I would say that there's those internal strengths, and we have never lost sight of the fact that you have to think outwardly. So I did that, and I was a meat buyer, and I bought most categories for the last 10 years for Scotland. And I got to a place where I was buying 85% of what I bought was bought locally, whether it be beef, pork, chicken, and it was processed locally. So I tried to keep the food miles down, and I built a lot of trust and reputation with the sector on that front. The other side of my job was obviously marketing and advertising. I had a dual role as well, and I think both of those feeding into each other, we were able to tell the story and communicate to our customers exactly what we were doing. We worked hand in glove. 10 years on, ironically, because I used to walk into meetings and I felt like the black sheep. Any agricultural meeting that I was, people used to sort of turn around and not want to talk to me, and I can understand the mistrust that there was. And I would say that when I was asked to be agricultural, I was absolutely taken aback. I thought it was the sheer irony that I would be, and I was very nervous, and still nervous when I go into a room of farmers, because I think I'm going to get pilloried for not being good at this or not having done that. But fundamentally, I don't think I was necessarily selected because I was buying all Scottish. That was one of the strengths. I think one of the reasons was I was quite strategic, and I was very outward focused, and I was always looking to the market, and I was also always thinking of consumer. And I think where we've got to recently, we've just launched an interim vision paper for Scotland. On Friday we did that, and it's definitely moving the mindset of farmers to be thinking outwardly as well as inwardly. So that's where we are in Scotland. And that's where I sit right now. I've also been asked to be on the National Council for Rural Advisors, and that's more about a development policy, for the rural sector, whether it be across agriculture or whatever. But I would definitely say, and for those of you, I don't know if they're all old enough in the room to know Pink Floyd, but I'm sure there's quite a few of you. When I joined buying, I was told I moved to the dark side, but I now think I have moved back from the dark side, and I'm on the best side of the moon now, I think. So that's just to give you a little bit of introduction, but I think it's relevant in terms of just as I go through. And what I've done in my slides is, and some of them, I've got too much text, just so you know that, because less is more, they always say, but I've just done it to help me talk myself through. I've just talked to you literally about what a buyer does, because that's what you're up against. You're up against the industry and the research that we put behind what we do when we're going to the market. And I think that I'd like to think in some of your groups later on you have a rethink about just how you get your house in order to, or do your homework to go out to the market. Then I've done a little bit about talking about just what the trends are and where I see the opportunities for farming, because I see there's a huge amount of opportunities the way we live our lives. And then I've just gone on to talk about trust as well, because trust is a big thing, and I'm sure a lot of you got lots of views on trust as well. So the buyer role, there's two sides to my role. It was always very logical, and then there was a huge part which was really emotional. So I've got logical and emotional. The way this slide's done, sorry, it doesn't portray that, but that's that, and it breaks down. From the logical point of view, we bought data, insight, always listening to the market, always listening to customers. We got, when you get your till receipts, you've got feedback all the time. At your peril, did you ignore that? And I think some people just think, this is the way I always do it. You have to adjust and change. And I think a lot of retailers have learned, if you don't listen to your customers, you can lose out. Don't make assumptions on the basis, any decision should be informed. Aldi spent a huge amount of time really thinking about what they're going to do and then how they're going to execute it. Adapt, we've adapted. I would say, there are always the things that are really important. Price is really important, but you have to adapt, and your product range when you're in peaks and troughs, and think about where your ranging is going. Seek to deliver sound commercials. Obviously, that's a contentious one, and that is what every retailer endeavours to do. But sometimes, some buyers will sacrifice sound commercials to drive growth, and the discounters probably, you will know, are guilty of that. We're actually living in a place, and I'll just talk from a meat point of view, where proteins, you would have thought historically you had meat and 2 veg. Gone are the days of meat and 2 veg. We've got flexitarians, proteins compete against each other, and it's, we have to, I, as a category buyer, I had to really think about what else was going on in the business to keep it invigorated. From an emotional point of view, I had the best job in the world. I don't know why I've given it up, but I had the best job in the world. I was hugely passionate about Scotland's produce. We've got a great story to tell. Lifestyle choices are changing. We've got young, discerning customers coming to us now that know a lot more than food that we ever do. They maybe not know how to cook it, but they certainly know a lot more, and maybe they don't have to pay for it. The parents have to pay for it. But fundamentally, coming through, there's a whole load of change. And obviously, for my job, I could create opportunities. It was great. I had given a wealth of opportunity just to think out the box and think new things. And fundamentally, I'm a housewife and I'm a mother, and I know what sells. And I think I brought a lot of that to the Aldi business in Scotland. My end game plan was obviously to seek golden opportunities. The importance of research, I can't tell you enough. What the piece we're doing in Scotland just now, it's like, think where your market is and research it before you set off. That's the starting point for all decision making. Help prioritise markets as well, because sometimes you can see, you have to be tactical about, where you're going. Evaluate the risks and the unexpected barriers. Right now we're living in a, it's just, I've got a couple of graphs later on. Things are all over the place, and you have to plan. You have to plan for that, and you have to take tough decisions sometimes. I know I could have gone in and sold a product, but I wouldn't have made any money. So, I had to pick and choose what I was going to do and when I was going to do it, or take the opportunity to, bring something to market, faster if I had to get it out there. Highlights new markets and opportunities. There's, whether it be, for me, bringing new things like venison consumption in Scotland. It's lean. You'd think there used to be this reputation that, it was, killing nice deer and all the rest of it. Nowadays, people are interested in what it does inside, what it makes them look like, eat healthily. That was a massive growing trend for us in Scotland. It's been around, but it was not accessible, so it's definitely much more accessible. Monitor existing markets. A lot of people as well, they're always chasing the new. You just have to watch what's going on with a winning product you've got out there. You have to look after it, and people really like to see things modified and changed. All of that research really does, as a buyer, and from your point of view as going out to the market with whatever sector you're in, it creates credibility and respect. That means a lot in terms of negotiation, because some people just think, I've created this thing, I'm going to take it, and they've got to like it. But if you've done all your research and you've positioned it, and you've got the story, and you've wrapped it all up, and you've worked out which segment you're after, then you've got a very credible story to tell. And all of this is obviously a sound base for the art of negotiation. I'll touch on negotiation because Duncan and I have already talked a bit around negotiation, which is a bit tricky when it comes to buying and selling as well. And obviously a lot of buyers don't have a good reputation. So who are you trying to reach? I would say I'm going to not even really go into geographic and demographic because they're pretty self-explanatory, you know, these days. But there is a market for agriculture, and I'm trying to make it relevant in that, you know, people, where they come from really matters, whether it be country, regional or country and town. There's scope for farming and there's a story to be told. And right now, a lot of the retailers are making a lot out of in that area. Demographics, you know, from us, I would be always thinking, right, who am I targeting? Whether it be age, income, status, you know, class, you know, but I would say the retailers are here, and there's a huge bun fight goes on around this in terms of convenience, because that's the biggest reason why people sell. That's the biggest reason why people where they go to shop, and secondly, price. But here, in these two areas here, I think farming, agriculture has got. We're moving into an area where psychodemographic. What does that mean? It's all about lifestyle, personality. And values, you know, and these are growing. This is a growing, massively growing area, and it's exactly what Caroline says. If you tell that story in that area, you have real agriculture has got real traction to be able to build a picture of who they are and what they're selling, and the story and what the good they're doing here. So this is an area I think is a real opportunity, and I'll cover it off in a little bit later. And behaviours, you know, you think we all just eat. These days, behaviour is a massive growth area in terms of all the sort of trends that are going on, whether it be occasion, we called it key events, you know, and whether you're selling in the UK market or abroad, occasions happen all the time, and people are really buying into they seem to need to have a reason to do anything. Benefits, you know, loyalties, you know, why people, I don't know, go to Waitrose these days for a cup of coffee, but you know, in terms of brands, why you buy a brand. I'm just trying to think one off the top of my head. Nike, you buy into that, you know, the kind of ethos that they have. Apple, you're buying into what that brand offers you. So it's usage or loyalty, and these are all emotional things, very intangible things. But in terms of agriculture, I think you know, if people knew more about what the value they're adding in terms of the biodiversity agenda, then I think there's a lot to be grown here, and a lot more strength and clout that could be given to the sector. Whereas sometimes I think you've touched on, it feels like you're doing an awful lot and not getting recognition for it. As I went into, this is where we are now. We're talking about time poor. I don't know if anyone in the room knows how long we actually allocate to cooking a meal these days.
20 minutes.
It's 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That's how much the average person in a week, you know, in an evening. And actually, 65% of us will be shopping twice a day these days. We're not doing a big shop till last week. 65% are shopping twice a day because food is so accessible. So we're going back and forward. We can't make up our mind of what we're having. They do say there's one good bit about that. That's people are endeavouring to waste less. I'm not absolutely convinced about that. It's just because you can. Ability to cook. You know, I've just said to you, people are interested in food. You know, there are the new prominence of chefs and lifestyles. It's all great, and people need to be coached along. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, they're still saying where people are learning to cook is from their parents. So if we have in the home people teaching their kids, which I think is lacking, and I think in Scotland we're trying to address that in education. Googling recipes, that's the highest footfall on Google is during the day about 5 o'clock. People, what do they do? What's for dinner tonight? So I think it's this is where the trends are. It's all about that kind of not knowing, and you know, and for us, for you guys, I think it's all about thinking about where you're going to put value back into the supply chain. And people when they go to these areas, they're thinking about if they're buying British, or they're thinking about, you know, they're buying that protein because it comes from here. And we have to sort of tie into if they're thinking of as a destination in these areas, they're not just doing it as a commodity. And also, lifestyle trends, it's amazing these days. You'd have thought pork consumption was going like this. And I know in England, the Sunday roast is still one of the biggest meals of the week. But in terms of pork consumption was going like this. And it's, as a buyer for me, it was, what can you do to reinvigorate? And it's all about cooking as fast as you can. You know, pulled pork has been a massive reinvention of pork, and it's finding all of those opportunities. Sous vide, another technology, it's adding life, means people don't have to spend a lot of time cooking. It just shows what's possible. That's reinvigorated a whole new ready-to-cook area where people are passing food off as their own. So just that's a kind of trend that I just wanted to sort of flow through. But it shows that shopping just isn't flat anymore about price. It's also about this whole agenda that's coming through. Don't believe everything you hear. You know, I was just talking to a couple of guys over lunch. You know, as a buyer, you know, you think buyers these days, supermarkets, they just want it big. Actually, as I'll explain later, big can actually trip them up quite a lot in terms of country of origin and all that kind of stuff. But small, I mean, for us in Scotland, you know, I had a lot of very credible, very well-run businesses producing fantastic product, and it, you know, and a great businesses. Now I'd like to think they didn't get swallowed up, and retailers can buy into that. Millennials, young people of today, have a strong and growing CR awareness. You know, you think, you know, this room is very well informed about agriculture, but there's a whole area there where they're aware of things, and you know, they want to protect the world and all that. But actually, how informed are they about agriculture and where the food comes from? I think there's a whole bit of work for us, for the retailers or for the agricultural sector. And again, in Scotland, we're talking that one up. Future shoppers are much more discerning, you know, they're very unforgiving. You know, they want to know much more about where the food and what's in it, and obviously the risks involved in not doing things correctly. And this area here, in terms of the advertising, social media has disrupted massively normal lines of communication, and it actually, from a production or from a you know, not from the buying, from the selling side of the fence, gives you a lot more power. You know, you can name and shame, and I think it's a way, you know, not to be discounted in terms of the power that it gives the sector. People find reasons to buy. You know, that's the health agenda is massive just now. Benecol, you know, as a brand is just, you know, they overcharge massively, but people are buying into it. So, you know, it just shows you what's possible again. Meaningful, unique selling points, links to agriculture. You know, the story that you tell and how you tell it. That, you know, I do believe that in terms of the way you should be thinking and the way you should be trying to bring your story to the table. And personality, I was talking about, all brands want to have a personality now, whether it be Dove and it's meant to be women of all sizes, or whether it be Nike and it's, you know, you want to conquer the world, or PepsiCo, you know, in terms of trying to be egalitarian, and they did trip themselves up on that front, but trying to be, you know, they can calm everything down. But you know, where in terms of agriculture and brands and, you know, your products and whether it be cereals or arable, you know, it's being able to make those, identify those stories and give it a personality. And I think that's an area where, I hate to say the word, Brexit might actually focus the minds and allow you to be much more vocal and have a bit more clout to bring those stories to the table. This was a quote from the Grocer magazine just not a couple of months ago. I just thought it was quite, just talking about the market, because everyone's thinking, well, the big retailers have got so much clout. The retailers that will outperform are the ones that have time to think outside the box, understand their consumers, bring new projects and brands to the market, and collaborate with their suppliers. I think this is key in terms of the way things are going, and you know, the volatility of the market, the shortage. You know, we know there's been shortages of butter. There's been various issues. You know, and actually, for the first time ever, I think retailers are starting to realise they're not infallible, and their supply chains, if they're not strong and the relationships are not there, or they haven't, you know, they can't just flip things over back and forth. You know, this could actually shame them in the future if they're not very careful. So trust. I would say that all I hear is that the supply chain there isn't a lot of trust, and I think that's absolutely correct. It just seems to be a bit them and us. Retailers work massively hard to build reputations, and trust in the market is hard to gain. It takes ages. Aldi invested an awful lot of money just in, you know, their image and all the rest of it. It's easily lost if you do something, and it's difficult to quantify. And I would say from an agricultural sector, and obviously the NFU are aware of this, but it's, you know, if people are going out there and saying they're doing something and they're not doing it, using all these things, these elements I've talked about before about the disruptive force, that is a way of, you know, we are in a place now where people before weren't heard, now they can be heard. And, you know, when you're talking about, I talked about the CR agenda and where it's going, you know, it used to be all about profitability. I think, you know, in terms of trust and how much people trust, or their trust in companies can be destroyed or can be, you know, make them think differently. Down the line, I think that will be a trend that will come to the fore more and more often. You know, there's enough out in the, you know, with harassment and all the things that in politics, there's enough stories to be told. But I don't doubt that in the food sector, agriculture, this naming and shaming will in the future will come to the fore. And maybe the primary sector should be more aware of their role in this. I just think that the coming together, and I can see that in terms of Brexit and people having to really get all the tools out of the box, that the essence of that will have to change. Cooperatives, I just put that on because in Scotland it's actually quite a low, I think it's only 7% of the farming community are in cooperatives, and that's against an average of 40% across Europe. And I just think there's something in there about trusting each other as well. So it's not only trusting the big, you know, the supply chain itself, but it's also trusting within the sector what is going on in Britain that we don't actually share, and we don't share information and trust so much. And I do think, again, trust pledges to buy British. Co-op, Aldi and Lidl are said they were out doing it. Actually, if everyone ends up being out to do it, I think we could get to a place where there won't be enough to go around. So that will cause problems in itself, and it might be a win-win situation for some of the some farmers. So it's just one to think about. This was another expression that's been bandied around, and I think a lot, and I think it ties into what Caroline had to say as well. This is what PepsiCo were using latte as their new buzzword, which meant local, authentic, and these are all the buzzwords of the traceable, transparent and ethical. Which of these words are you not playing to at the moment in the work that you do? You're playing exactly into this agenda, and I think that there's a lot more to be made from that, and I think the trend in the future will be people will be really thinking about farming and the food chain. Consumer-facing companies looking to leverage on above. You know, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to leverage all these, but a few of them, as I say, PepsiCo did an advert, and I know, so it's an abstract advert, but it was a disaster for them. They managed to get their market share back, did fantastically well, and then they went out with a girl drinking a can of Coke in a demonstration, and they just thought that that was kind of like a really ethical thing for them to be doing, and it just was totally inappropriate. But they're just wanting to be seen to be playing into all of these agendas, but actually the reality is who's playing into all of these agendas? Many of you in this room are. So I think going forward, that's something to think about. And online searches are giving consumers so much more power. They can, you know, check if you're not following through, if you're not, and agriculture pretty much follows through on all of these fronts. I put this one up because I said I'd talk about buyers, and just in terms of buyers have got such a bad rep, and I think I've been trained to do lots of these things, and it's true, and how you're supposed to build trust and all the rest of it if all of this goes on. But I've just put it up because it's, again, in everything I've said today, I'd like to think that you're thinking, we do this, buyers do this, but why don't all of you not do this? Why don't you say no or whatever? So these are, and it's all negative, but it goes on all the time, so it's playing the game, and if that, you know, if they're playing the game, I'd like to think I didn't play too many of these games, and that's why I got selected as an agricultural champion. But it does. If you want to be selling into a buyer, the buyer needs to be convinced. Customers really need to want the product. I need to want and I want to desire that product. The product has to offer the customer value, understand the landscape around it, you know, in terms of what you're, you know, is, I don't know, I was talking to a gentleman there about sugar beet, you know, where are you thinking about your products, and, you know, where is the demand in the future going to be? And is there a risk of letting the supply chain down? Because fundamentally, you know, it's nothing worse than weaning a product, you know, weaning a demand for a product and we can't fulfill it. And then as well, looking to the horizon, it's that crystal ball. There's so much volatile pricing going on now. It's just managing your budget and managing ahead, and buyers have to do that all the time now, because we're just thinking, but in terms of trust for us, we could never get the retail up. But I just thought it's in terms of negotiation, I think again you guys could be playing into this. And I've just put these on because it's just been so volatile in the last, it's been all over the place. And I think it's mitigating, making sure you're ahead and knowing what's going on in the future, so you're ahead of the game, thinking you're ahead of all of these things, and thinking how if it's going to be, if it's been like this for this year, will it be the same again? And it's just thinking, and from a buyer's perspective, that's what I'm looking at. We're looking at things like this all the time, thinking, how can I mitigate against that? Or what do I have to do? Or do I have to make losses here to make money here? Or, as I say, because actually consumers don't really tolerate us putting the price up. But the reality of all this conversation I've just had with you is that we do need to probably, maybe the situation we're in, Brexit will mean we're putting some value back into the chain. We may have to pay more for our food. Right now, I don't know if, it's just another fact, that right now, I don't know if you know where food sits in terms of value. DEFRA measured it in terms of our incomes, where it sits in terms of the 1, 2, 3 and 4. In terms of, say, if you think about recreation and culture, think about transport, think about any ideas? Food sits 4th, so it's actually behind. It's, we pay more for our cars, we pay more for our energy in our households, we pay more for recreation and eating out and culture than we do actually on food. And I think it might be that we have to, with all of this volatility, start thinking about paying more for our food. And I think that's something that's going to be challenging us going forward. So from you, from an agricultural perspective, from a buying perspective, I think it's going to be more challenging than it used to be. We just need to research, study business opportunities, ranging and pricing. And I think you've got to ask, would they want my products, the newness, whether you think about the price, where it's going to be, and what is a viable price, exclusivity. You might end up having a very niche product, and actually that's where you derive the value from. Also, just thinking about cycles, I have to say in agriculture and farming and some of the sectors I came across, they didn't really think about the market and where you could potentially make money. And we talked about this a lot in lamb in Scotland, having lamb always ran short, and everyone wanted to have lamb all year round. And it's just about maybe adjusting some of the cycles to think, when can the money be made? And I just put that in, that's completely a buyer's way of thinking, but I'd say you could maybe apply that to some of the things that you do, just thinking about that's the way the world works now. People want to be accessing things, and accessing when others can't, or when you can't get it anywhere else. And in Scotland at the moment, there are still 200 independent outlets in Scotland alone, and these are kind of like niche farm shops and all the rest of it. They're very lucrative businesses for very niche exclusive products. And I think it's not just about, obviously everyone wants volume and selling it through the retailers, and we probably could do a better job in the retail, but I think the farming community could own that story better. But there's still a huge market out there for us to think differently about how, where our products are turning up and how much we derive for them. So I'll just say from the point of view of the subject topic here, where to next? Everything I had to do as a buyer was apply business acumen, be professional, expound the positives of what we're doing, and the story in terms of how we portrayed it to our consumers, mitigate against threats, really listen to your consumers, listen to your market, collaborate and adapt. And I think the most important of all of those is adapt. So I think that just sums up, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about that of buying, but I hope you can apply some of that thought process to what you do in terms of your monitor farms. I know it's a lot of business words, but fundamentally it's at the heart of everything we do in a viable business.
Thank you.